Hello everyone, so my name is Serge and this is going to be my first ever Booktube video. So I'm pretty excited for this adventure to begin. I've been on Goodreads for quite a while now, I would say for like more than 6 years, and I'm a regular reviewer there, and I recently started my Instagram account, a Bookstagram account to be more specific. The handle is called Loud-Minded Guy Reads, so I share books I read regularly there. So I decided to make this YouTube channel to kind of, join the BookTube community in a way, to give my opinions on certain books on all books that I read, hopefully. And it's meant to be like a little companion thing for my, Bookstagram. So I know the setting isn't that, Bookstagramish, because I literally just moved here 2 weeks ago. I'm currently in Toronto, Canada, and I'm hoping that through time the the setting will improve, the background will be more professional, and the quality of my video production will increase. So, September was a very hectic month for me because, again, I was moving from one country to another. So I didn't get to read that many books. I've only read 4 this month. Well, last month. We are October now. And I want to talk about them. I just want to give my thoughts on each book briefly. I don't want there to be any spoilers. I've read 4 books in this I'm going to divide this video into, a few sections based on the genre of each of these books. So I've read 1 mystery book. I've read 2 sci-fi books, and I've read 1 fantasy book. So I'm going to start with the mystery one. This one is called A Small Fire Burning by Paula Hawkins. The reason why I wanted to read this book is simply because it was a mood read. I felt like reading a mystery book, and the weather in September gets a bit gloomier, and it's just the right time, to read a mystery sometimes. So I chose to read this one because some of my friends on Goodreads had read it. So this is a very cozy book. I would say I enjoyed it. I mean, I do have some problems with it, which I will discuss. The thing is, I loved the character work in this book the most. Like, the characters were just very well written, in my opinion. Well, most of them at least. And I got very attached to 2 characters. So that in itself made this reading experience very enjoyable for me. So, small plot summary: a young guy in his 20s is found murdered in a boathouse. And we have 3 women who are somehow involved with this individual, and they are, naturally they are suspects of the crime. So we basically explore the backstories of each of these women and how they have interacted with this person, and what led to, and then we would hopefully find out what led to the murder itself, right? It's a What I would say is that it's a very cozy book. Like I said earlier, it's basically based in a townhouse by the sea, and it's a small town, and everybody knows each other, and we have like a sense of community, which I really liked. There are characters that I really, really, really enjoyed, but for the sake of avoiding spoilers, I don't want to talk about them, because if I tell you which characters I like, that might give you an impression on whether they are the murderer or not. So I don't want to skew your view on this in any sort of way. But I would say that the characters were really well written. Each of them has a very relatively tragic backstory, and these backstories are quite realistic. It's something that can happen to all of us. Like, some are suffering from the passing of a very close loved one, others are suffering from loneliness, and others are suffering from some form of mental illness that is affecting their ability to function properly. And exploring each of these perspectives was very fascinating for me, because I really got to, connect with the characters on a human level. And again, like I said, 2 characters I really, really, really loved and I really cared for. And, this book does very well, in, like, tugging at the heartstrings in a way. So I think if you like well-developed characters and a nice, cozy mystery setting by the sea, I think that this book is for you, because it is, nicely written and the characters are quite well made. Now, one of the issues I have with this novel is that I wish that we got to know the victim better. Like, yes, we do know the basics of this victim, who he was and what was he doing there, but I feel like each point of view was like, centered on a particular, like one of these women, like one of these people, and we see him painted through that lens, right? So we don't really see this person, in my opinion at least, for who he is. And in the end, we're just like thinking, okay, but what were this person's motivations? Like, what happened? What was really going on inside his head? I felt like that the desire for me to know that wasn't really satisfied. You might think differently, I don't know, but that was my experience. I hoped that I would get at least one full chapter, like detailing his own personal experience through all of these events that happened, so I could know where his headspace was in a way. And I didn't really get that, so that was kind of disappointing. And then I felt like there was potential to make this a very well, it is a dark story in the end because it talks about a murder, right? But there was storyline basically that could have went in a very dark and interesting direction, and the author was hinting at it, and in the end I felt like we just get another explanation, and that one, despite being again quite dark in a way, it's not as interesting as the initial like the initial thing we were being led to believe would have been. Again, very vague. I know I'm not making much sense because I'm trying to keep this spoiler free as much as possible, but like these were my qualms with this book. However, because I really, really loved the characters, especially the two that I will not mention in this video, I decided to give this a 4 stars. I mean, it would probably be a 3.5 or 3.75 rounded up to 4, but I just like the characters and they are memorable. Like, even now, it's been like, it's going to be almost a month since I read this book. I still remember these characters, and that says something about the writing quality. Now let's go to the sci-fi. So here I basically read 2 sci-fi books, like I probably said. One is called Dying of the Light by George R.R. Martin. Now, this was his debut novel, and I personally enjoyed it. It was good. It might not be for everyone, but I personally really liked it. Again, spoiler free, we are basically exploring a planet. It's a sci-fi, so it's like like we're in the middle of space and we're exploring a planet that's called Warlorn. Now, this planet is, as the title might suggest, dying. You know, uh, like this planet has been moving away from its main sun orbit, like it's moving away from its central star, and the farther away it moves, the wildlife on this planet begins to die. The planet grows colder. It becomes less hospitable to life. So we have this very dreary, dark atmosphere, which George R. R. Martin very expertly wrote, in my opinion. It's a very atmospheric book. How I don't know, but when I think of sci-fi, when I think of classic sci-fi, there is this little pinch of nihilism going on. There's this pinch of, you know, a sense of meaninglessness, a sense of sadness, or a sense of, you know, like some post-apocalyptic vibe that's going on. We're far into the future, and we're basically trying to colonize other planets, and we have that nostalgia of Earth in the back of our minds. So it's just very, it can explore very, you know, like somber themes, and I think that this book does that expertly. So this basically we explore this planet called Warlorn through the lens of a character called Dirk, who has been called back to basically to help his ex-lover, his ex-girlfriend, whose name is Gwen. He's very much in love with her, and he would basically do anything for her at this point. He's very much devoted and loyal to her, even though it's been years since they've been together. Their relationship hadn't worked out. So now he sees this as a second chance to rekindle this relationship with this woman. But here's the catch: this woman is married to somebody else now. So he has been basically called to this planet to assist this woman in something that is going on with her life. And he's always in this, in this dynamic where he wants to get close to her, and from his perspective, she has called him to this planet. But then he sees that she's quite devoted to this husband of hers, and there is this very interesting relation dynamic between Dirk and Gwen, the girl who called him, basically, because he basically wants her, and she kind of gives mixed signals, and she shows a lot of resentment, really, towards the relationship that they've had. This person is married to a man who belongs to a very conservative culture. Okay, and in this culture, basically, um, there is a special kind of bond between two men where they become even closer than brothers. It's not a romantic relationship, but it's like, a bonded for life sort of thing. So in this situation, her husband, his name is John. I believe that's how it's pronounced. He is basically, he has this close sacred bond with this other man, and this man is, by virtue of this bond, he is also involved in their marriage. So you can say it's somewhat of a polyamorous relationship where the girl Gwen has to sleep with both of them. Like, she has the obligation to also sleep with her husband's close companion, and she has to deal with him, and he's quite the abusive character. We also get to explore this culture and the intricacies of the culture that John, her husband, belongs to. So in this culture, basically, terms such as friendship don't exist. Family bonds are not really relevant. So, for example, if somebody is, someone's son, like, there is no close bond between the mother and son. Like, just because this woman has birthed this child, it doesn't mean that this child owes her anything. So it's a very different system. It's a very different cultural dynamic. And basically we come in and, like, Dirk discovers this culture as he's interacting with Gwen. He is seeing the abusive dynamic that she's in, and he wants to save her from it. He wants to save her from this dynamic, and he wants to get her back, basically. But then the issue here is that, does Gwen really want to return to him? What does Gwen want exactly? What is the point of him being here? These are the main plot points that we are basically discovering in a way. And what I really, really liked about this book is that we explore this culture in depth, and we form connections with the people who belong to this culture, that in the end we kind of start feeling sympathy towards them. We start liking them. We start feeling attachment to them as characters. I mean, at least I did, as a reader, and I think this was the experience of many other people who read this. This book, like, the nature around us is dying, forests are slowly, like, dying from the cold. The world is becoming inhospitable, but we also kind of have a sense of hope dying as well, because Dirk, he is basically seeing Gwen, and he's seeing how she's pushing further and further away from him, and he feels like him reuniting with her is an impossibility. So we even see that dying of hope in a way. So it is quite it's quite a depressing novel in a way, right? Um, so that's the main theme, according to me, from my reading experience. Like, things are dying, things are wilting, hope is going away. We don't know what we stand for. We don't know if there's a light at the end of this very dark tunnel. The world building here was amazing. I loved it personally. We have very diverse ecosystems on this planet. We have very, like, nice misty forests. We have very interesting creatures that have evolved in this plane, in this planet. Uh, the deep dive into the cultures on this planet is also very, very nice. And this main culture that we're basically exploring, it kind of reminds me of some version of the Dothraki from, his very famous, George's very famous, A Song of Ice and Fire series. However, it's very interesting to see this type of highly conservative culture, living in the far future, where we have artificial intelligence, we have spaceships, we have technology. So seeing these two intertwine, amazing. I loved it. So I personally like gave this 4 stars. I really liked this book so much, and I do recommend you read it if these themes are of any interest to you. Now, the next one is my favorite read of the month, my favorite read of September. It's a 5 stars for me. It's Hyperion by Dan Simmons. It's also a very known book. A lot of you have probably read it already, and if you haven't read it, well, this is me giving my spoiler-free thoughts. So basically, this is also a sci-fi book. However, it's quite different than A Dying of the Light because the format of this book is just, very somewhat unique in a way. We basically have, like, I think if you read the blurb of this book, you basically see a plot device unfolding. Like, you see that there is an impending war coming in on a planet called Hyperion. And basically, we have a group of pilgrims who are on this religious mission to go somewhere on this planet. It's called the Time Tombs. And they have to do a pilgrimage there for this mythical creature, which is not really mythical because, like, it is there, it does exist. It's very elusive. We don't know what this creature exactly is. It's called the Shrike, and basically, it's about their journey, towards this area, while a major invasion is about to take place on Hyperion, on the planet itself. Now, the thing is, though, the catch is that this book is basically it's a collection of it's like a collection of 7 short stories, and basically each pilgrim gives their own personal experience, which has led them to make the decision to undertake this pilgrimage to Hyperion, So it's a very, you know, it's not something you would expect when you're reading the blurb. This is not very, if you want to get to the main point of the actual plot, that's not the book for it. I believe that will be, covered in the next book of this series. However, in this one, we basically see short stories of each individual. So I think that if you're going to read this book, go into it with that expectation. However, I really think it has been done very perfectly because I believe Dan Simmons is an amazing writer, and I do think that this book is basically him flexing his writing skills because each short story is basically a different genre of sci-fi. So you have several different genres of sci-fi in the same book, and each story basically has a completely different vibe, a completely different theme. It explores different concepts, and it's just beautiful. And knowing that all of these exist on the same world and all of these point of views eventually, combine into one when they all come together to go towards that pilgrimage, I think it's very, very good. Now, because this is a group of short stories and, it's a collection of short stories and each short story is vastly different than the other, it's quite normal for you to like one story but not like the other, So a lot of people might like 2 or 3 stories but hate the rest, or they might just like one story and hate the rest, or like me, they might just really love all of them. Now, of course, I don't love all of them equally. I do have some favorites. I would believe my favorite is the priest story. Basically, society is divided into 2 parts. We basically have the hegemony. Basically, these are people, like normal human beings as you would imagine them, and these people are basically, the hegemony attempts to unite each planet in the solar system, and to, in several solar systems really, and to create a shared society. And it's kind of like this like mega empire where each planet is supposed to kind of adapt to this ruling class, this empire, and be under its control. And we also have another group which are called the Outsters, and these people are basically rebels who are against this whole system. and there is an ongoing war between these factions. So another theme, this brings me to another theme explored in this book, is basically cultural identity, because we have like some planets who do not want to be part of the hegemony. They want to be their own thing, and we explore the idea of, is it really ethical to unite several different cultures and attempt to erase their cultural identity to basically make them, submit to one dominant culture. Like that theme is very nicely explored in this book alongside many other themes. So I personally gave this book a 5 stars. If it is something that interests you, I think that you should definitely, give it a read. Now, this was like the end of the sci-fi section. So now for the fantasy, this is a very popular book. I mean, I just read it last month, but I'm sure all of you, like most of you, if not all of you, know it. It's basically Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. So I've read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson before, and I personally, even though a lot of people don't like that book and they think that it's like one of his weakest books, I really like Elantris. Elantris has a special place in my heart, but I had high expectations when it came to Mistborn because it's his like he wrote that later when he had more skill in writing, and I was like I had a lot of high expectations. I don't think that this book really met those high expectations, but it was quite a decent read regardless. Basically, in this world, which is also part of the Cosmere, of course, um, evil has won, So the Dark Lord, which is like the evil antagonist, like he's the Lord Voldemort of this universe. He basically took control, right? He won, and it's been 1,000 years since he won, and he has this entire region under his firm iron grip. He has it under the control of his empire, and basically it's kind of like end times, like you have ash falling from the sky, the plants are mostly gray and black, the sky is red, sunlight is red. It's like a very dark, dreary world. And basically, you have different classes of citizens. So you have the aristocrats, who are basically, the rich, spoiled people who like go to balls and who go to luncheons, and they live a relatively privileged life. And then you have the people underneath who are the ska. The ska are basically slaves. They have no rights. They have no status. All they have to do is work for their superiors. So they're basically farmers or cleaners, and they're very much abused. And on top of these two classes, we have the inquisitors, and like the people who are basically overseeing the lord rulers, the dark lords rule and empire. They're basically his supervisors, like the supervisors of the people, I mean. And then at the top of this hierarchy, you have the lord ruler himself. So it's a very dreary, depressing world. And here this is a rebellion story, so we are following a group of thieves who decided to overthrow this empire. They are led by a heroic man named Kelsier, who basically has a far-reaching vision to basically get rid of the Lord Ruler and to topple his empire, right? So he basically put together this group of thieves, and they're working together to dismantle this person's empire. So Kelsier is the main character here. And then we have another main character who's a street urchin named Vin. She's also, like, she is a thief, and she's a very traumatized girl. She's a teenager, and she had to live most of her life on the streets, joining thieving crews to survive, you know? So this novel explores that story, that rebellion story. It's part of a trilogy, as you all probably know. And we basically have Allomancy, which is like the main magic system used here. Uh, I'm sure all of you know that Brandon Sanderson's magic system is quite unique because it has a very scientific air to it. It's very structured. It's very, linear. It has specific defined rules that you cannot break, which is like very unique. It's not a soft magic system. So if you're looking for like a soft mystical magic system, you will not find it in this book. You basically, the magic system is based on ingesting certain types of metal, and each metal gives you a certain superpower. So most people can only burn, use one type of metal, but then we have very rare people called Mistborns who can use all of the metals. So they're basically superheroes. They're like OP, very powerful and stuff. Now, what I thought about this book, uh, I've read Joe Abercrombie. Like, I've read his novels. I've read the First Law trilogy. I've read Best Served Cold, the standalone. So this was like one of my main exposures to fantasy before Sanderson. So I kind of went in here with certain expectations. I went in expecting much more moral grayness, even though I've read Elantris before and I know that Sanderson's style isn't really based on moral grayness. We do have characters who kind of slide in between good and evil, but we basically have distinct moral alignments that we constantly feel throughout the book. We have people who we know are good, who have a good heart, and then we have people who we know are bad. So we have this like binary which doesn't really exist in some certain grim dark books. I'm not saying Mistborn is a grim dark book. I'm just saying that those were books that I've read before. So I was kind of going into this book expecting Vin to be like, if you've read First Law, I was expecting her to be some sort of pharaoh, Pharaoh is basically a character in First Law who kind of has a similar story to Vin, but she's quite jaded, quite ruthless. Like, with Vin, I didn't really see that. Like, I would have preferred some moral grayness. I would have preferred some more a sense of realism. But I guess this is just like the genre Brandon Sanderson writes. For example, Kelsier, he does have his, like egotistic moments where you basically feel like he's just some sort of, false prophet who's basically doing all of this to be able to somehow gain status. And we even have implications that he might be going on the path that the Lord Ruler has went on. And we do have these comparisons. But Kelsier as a character, in general, he's like the typical archetype of that hero, that visionary who is basically, I don't know, a giant ball of light, a giant ball of goodness that's trying to lead people into victory. Like, I feel like the characters mostly fall into, archetypes. And so if you want more in-depth characters which are more complex, I don't think you will find them in this book. Uh, so there's that. However, there is satisfying plot in this book. You know how, again, I keep comparing to Joe Abercrombie, but with Joe Abercrombie, we kind of feel like the plot takes a backseat and the characters are very, very intricately developed. But here, I feel like the plot has a bit more focus, and I think most, character moments serve as plot devices, right? So that is good, even though, again, with Sanderson, we have this, like, you know, this large middle chunk where not much really happens, and we're just having different, like, interactions between characters, which, in my opinion, some like they don't have that much substance. They're basically putting plot pieces together. It's like the domino pieces are being put together, and then eventually we have something called the Sander Lanch, where a lot of where like shit hits the fan. Basically, a lot of things happen. The plot moves forward at a very fast pace, and we're like, oh my god, what the hell is going on? So again, I think Sanderson has a very well-known way of writing, and Mistborn is quite it's a stereotypical Sanderson book. Um, the ending surprised me personally. I wasn't expecting that ending, and it made me want to read the next book. Because I'm sure the next book is going to be quite different. Like this book, what's good is that it stands very well on its own. Like it doesn't depend on you necessarily having to read the next two books to be able to be satisfied. The book itself is very satisfying, but at the same time, we get these little like things at the end which make us want to continue reading and being like, okay, but what else is going to happen to these characters later? So yeah, I gave this book a 4 stars. Like It might be a 3.75 and I'm writing to 4, I'm not sure. It was okay, but it wasn't something like that I would die to read again, you know. It's not like something extraordinary. It's good for what it's trying to do. But yeah, I hope you liked this video. If you guys want more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and all that. I'm not sure if this is going to get any views, to be honest, because I don't know how far the algorithm will push this. So I might get like 2 views like in the next 6, 7 months, but that's fine, you know. I just want to have this resource available online of me basically making a video diary of all the books I read. So yeah, that's fine. I'm going to link my socials down in the description. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful reading month. Like, it's October now. What did you read if you watched this, and if you want to comment, I'm not sure. You can tell me what books you've read in the month of September. What books are you reading now? What was your favorite, September read? And yeah, so that's it. I hope to see you guys soon, and bye bye.